Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Education Vanguard. I'm Justin Hardman. Just a bit of admin before we kick off. If you're enjoying these conversations, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the feed in the podcast player of your choice. This will ensure you get them first. Liking and rating the podcast also helps us reach more educators around the world. With that shameless plug out of the way, I'd like to introduce today's episode. Today we continue the phase takeover of the podcast with a special double feature recorded live on the ground at the phase conference in Singapore this past November. In the first part, you'll hear an interview between Patz and Helen Batteley. Helen is an internationally renowned consultant in early childhood physical education and movement play. I was really taken by her passionate advocacy for early childhood education and how we need to be intentional about our choices for early learners, not just watered down educational programs from older students. Then we shift gears completely to look at the future of education with Thomas Matthews' interview with Tricia Friedman. Tricia and Thomas have a wide-ranging conversation where, firstly, Tricia offers a great insight that with the AI conversation, we should not be as focused on the traditional concern about plagiarism, but rather, what is the impact going to be on relationships? That the impact of AI, in other words, is going to be much deeper and more elemental than we often consider. Related to that, I was really moved by her comments about schools being first and foremost about community, and we shouldn't have a tunnel vision focus on success by traditional metrics. With that, I'll hand over to these two conversations. I hope you enjoy them as much as I did.
Helen, thank you so much for coming to phase conference. Is this the first time at phase for you?
It is, yeah, my first time.
What are you hoping to contribute to the conference?
To raise the profile of early childhood physical activity and movement play. It was a pleasure to be invited to speak because early childhood is often an area that's forgotten at conferences and events. I was delighted to be invited and all the sessions have been very well attended and it's been wonderful to be here and I'm looking forward to the keynote tomorrow.
Yeah, it has been an amazing first few days with plenty of people giving some really key insight into that early years program. So what are some of the key messages from your keynotes and workshops that you'd like to share with sort of the wider audience, perhaps people that weren't able to make it to those sessions?
Well, we've been talking about the concept of physical literacy in early years and what that looks like, and the foundations being about relationships, those reciprocal relationships with young children, drawing on the contents, the whole ecosystem around that child, so thinking about families, thinking about those classroom teachers, having those conversations, really building up a picture of that child's life so that we can adequately prepare our content appropriately for these children that are coming into our setting. We can't always assume that they've had sporting knowledge, that their movement competence can be at a certain level, because in early childhood it range so drastically in terms of what they can and can't do.
No, you're right, and it's really important to be able to pitch that at the right level, isn't it? And to be able to engage them in that way. I completely agree, it's a really important aspect to start from. Have you got any sort of stories or examples from practice that you've seen elsewhere, perhaps internationally or in the UK, with where these interventions or these type of programs that you're using are really coming to fruition and where you're seeing a lot of success from it?
Yeah, I've got a physical activity adventure pack, which is a scheme of work I created as part of my research at the Centre for Research in Early Childhood. And that scheme of work is the foundation programme before we look at providing more sports-based, structured PE activities for young children. And it's currently being used in 55 international schools and we're hearing fantastic feedback. What's really interesting is that the scheme of work, because it's physical development, so it focuses on PE, gross motor, interoceptive system, vestibular system, proprioceptive system, lots of sensory input as well, that we're seeing that actually it's not just the physical competence that's changing, that's excelling, it's social emotional development, the children's sense of self, we're seeing them becoming more confident, and interestingly handwriting as a result of developing core strength and upper body strength. We're seeing impact on handwriting skills improving.
I love that. That's, just provoking another question from my side then. You're looking at this sort of holistic development from perhaps a PE setting, let's say, but Are you seeing a lot of these cross-curricular links as well, where there's benefits in other subject areas or other areas that these children might be involved in?
100%. And that's why we need to think about physical development, physical activity, PE, physical literacy as that holistic approach. So really thinking about that whole child. And this is why having those conversations with the classroom teachers and with families is vital.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And do you do much work with families on that sort of topic? Is it something that you engage parents in? Do you do training with them?
Yes, yeah, I do. I was here at Tanglin last year and I did some sessions we invited the parents in of kindergarten and foundation stage, and it was really successful. They were very surprised that so many parents turned up, and I got the parents to reflect on their childhood and things they enjoyed, and we spoke about the importance of physical development and movement and how that impacts on the whole child, so not just looking at PE and motor competence.
Wow, yeah, that's brilliant.
And it was great, it was really successful. So yeah, I'd love to do it. I've done it in lots of UK schools, but so far only Tanglin in Singapore. So at the schools, I'm available.
Absolutely. Okay, so you've made obviously a significant contribution to early years and physical activity, and whether it's internationally or within the UK. I'm just want to tie back into some of the points you've already mentioned about why you feel that area is really important to you and to the educators. What are you really thinking that this is developing now? Perhaps some of the issues that young people are facing, and also what's that sort of building in the future as they move through their sort of education journey?
Globally, there's an early childhood inactivity crisis, and it's massively impacting on all areas of children's learning and development. So it is really vital that we start that relationship with movement from as soon as possible. Having those conversations prenatally even, it needs to happen within the health service, within education, within the social sector. We really do need to be thinking about children's movement. And as PE teachers and movement ambassadors, we really do need to be spreading that message far and wide. Have I answered your question? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see within that, the education side with teacher education, is there space or a demand or a need for that from what you see in your practice and when you reach out and work with these other schools? Because there might be some schools that have PE specialists in those areas, and there might be some schools, and probably a large amount of schools, that don't have those sort of PE specialists. So I just wondering how you might link in that sort of teacher education, what you're trying to obviously promote and get these children moving more. You obviously need teachers on board with that. So do you have any sort of strategies or areas, resources that you tend to go to for that?
I would certainly be looking at development from the bottom up. What I see across the board in lots of international schools is that a lot of the content for the younger cohort is watered down from that of secondary or even Key Stage 2. But actually we need to have an understanding of developmental milestones, we need to have an understanding of the sensory systems, we need to have an understanding of those children and how they develop, and thinking about play, thinking about joy, thinking about curiosity and creativity. And there are plenty of resources out there, but I would say that as a PE teacher, we could all have exactly the same lesson plan, but we would deliver it differently because we all have our very own pedagogical approach to teaching. So I would say find out what works for you, what works for your children, but observe the children first before you start thinking about your lesson plans, before you start thinking about your content. It always surprises me when I see people preparing for their lessons before they've even met their children. We need to know these children. We need to know, because what we're seeing across the board is actually that we're seeing significant developmental delays from what we saw 15, 20 years ago. Children are further behind in terms of their social emotional development, in terms of their physical competence. So we really do need to be considering that when we're looking at our lesson plans and looking at our planning and preparation.
Yeah, and it ties into knowing your children, doesn't it? You really need to know the individuals, but collectively also classes or groups of children. What are their sort of demands? Where are they at right now? Where are their strengths? Can we harness on that? But obviously focus on those areas of development that you're saying across the board. We're seeing trends and patterns that actually there's a lot of children that need support in certain areas. So
absolutely. Connection.
Yeah. Do you see any other sort of challenges when it comes to that sort of development, or maybe even opportunities on the back of that? Is there anything that you see when you're working with these different teachers and schools that could lend itself towards the future and developing this further?
I've been doing some fabulous work at the British School in Brussels, which is a fabulous school. They have a real collaboration between the early years classes and the PE staff, and I was working over there for a week and I did some training with them, and then observed and assessed some of the PE provision, and it's fantastic that they're just really connected to the children. So the teacher might say, oh, Harriet's having a really bad day today, she's not herself. So that enables that PE teacher to understand a little bit more about those children and keeping those conversations open, and it enables you as a PE teacher to be able to adapt your lesson, and maybe Harriet would come and hold your hand for some of the lesson, and you're able to offer that connection and know how to support those children adequately and professionally.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great success story. It sounds like it should definitely be reaching out to the school and asking them what they're doing and seeing what they can share. Yeah. Just to wrap up and looking forward, what is your hope for the future of physical activity, specifically with an early years focus? What do you hope your work and other people's work in this area is going to get us to, and what sort of position would we be in?
It would be great to see more children showing that level of confidence and confidence in their own body, starting at a younger age. It would be great if, as a society, we could acknowledge that and provide more accessible spaces for children to play and explore. I heard that in China, children aren't allowed to climb trees, and I just thought that's tragic, actually. I'm sure many of us climbed trees when we were younger. Can we as a society help offer safe spaces for children to play, to explore, to be curious? Can we as PE teachers provide appropriate lessons that are developmentally appropriate and stage appropriate for these children, really thinking about their stage of development, not their age of development, and supporting families more to acknowledge that actually time away from screens and moving more is going to benefit their children both cognitively, socially and physically.
Amazing. If anyone listening to the podcast or this episode is interested in finding out more about you and the work that you're doing, is there anywhere they can go and find that?
There is on my website, which is www.musicandmovement.org.uk, or find me on LinkedIn or Instagram or X. And the Physical Activity Adventure Pack, PAP, is my scheme of work for early years children, kindergarten and reception and foundation stage.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Helen, for talking to us and for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, Tricia. This is your first phase, so I know we're only a day in, but how do you feel?
Honestly, I don't think I needed more than 15 minutes to sense how special of an environment phase has. The energy, the enthusiasm, and also just the openness of the people here really wanting to make the most of this learning experience and this community. I was totally floored with the level of hospitality. It is such a special environment, and I know that does not just happen. So for all of the people that have been a part of really cultivating that, job well done. Like, it is really palpable what you have done.
Yeah, it's fun. When we were doing the standing activity, I was trying to think if it has been 5, has it been 6, has it been 7? I think it's been 6 for me, specifically because of the China one that we did last year, but I loved the environment as well. And we were talking earlier about wellness a little bit, right? Do you want to share kind of your thoughts on that?
It's never been more critical, I think, for us to be developing strategies. But the thing that seems different here at Phase is it is not just a theory, it is not just a why, but it's a let's experience it for ourselves firsthand, which I think is necessary. And I wish more organizations were saying, like, let's get in the sandbox and look at what's going to work and really have an expansive toolkit. Because when it comes to wellness, of course, there's no silver bullet, and there's lots of creative people out there trying things. And I really just applaud how supportive people are and saying, let's test this out, let's try this, let's share, let's be generous with our ideas, because schools, society just desperately need that right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was probably one of the really fantastic things that became mainstream for people after or during and after COVID. I know, especially for me, right? I come from small town Texas and pretty rough around the edges type of upbringing, and it was nice to soften up a little bit and focus on myself and realize that there's a whole lot of happiness out there to be had, and that's just about asking questions and talking to people and being open. And yeah, so I totally agree. Your keynote was fantastic, so thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
It really hit home with me. I've been just trying to dive in as deep as I can to AI, and I feel like I'm just barely in, but what do you feel like is the one message that you want to resonate with everybody from that keynote?
I am hoping that people walked away thinking, how do I start the conversation and realize, even if I don't see myself as like an AI expert, especially I think in the realm of PE and health, you are a friendship expert, and this is a technology that is going to impact relationships. Arguably, it already is. And I think I've been increasingly more and more frustrated with where some of our attention has been misdirected in the AI conversation. I think the idea of being fixated on issues of just plagiarism is the tip of the iceberg, and I think we've got to realize this is a technology that's going to have such a deeper rooted influence. And I just think let's really think about what matters the most. Is preserving the essay the most important thing right now? I would say it is not. I think there's better modes of assessment on the other side of this, but I would like to see K-12 education just becoming a little bit more aware of what's going on with companion AI, how much money is being put into it at a time when there's no regulation, and also to realize that all technology has good uses, bad uses, and it is the same with companion AI. So I think it's one of those topics that it does feel very strange and upsetting. And at the same time, I think it is upsetting because we realize there are aspects of the way that we relate to one another that really deeply matter. So let's talk about what it means to protect that.
Yeah. You asked us a question that was a little bit difficult for me to answer on the spot. I'm still thinking about it a little bit, so I'll ask you. You said in 10 years, how do you think your current school is preparing for your future school? What's the answer that you wanted us to give? What's the silver bullet to that?
I think it really depends school to school. For me, in my experience, I think it would come back to this idea of realizing there are so many better alternatives to the way that we assess students, to the philosophy of education that we communicate to students. I think a lot of education has been, again, very focused, almost tunnel vision, on a competitive, one person doing their best, where I think the idea of us being together collectively in a school should be about us building community. And I think collaboration, hopefully, is going to be a much bigger part of the conversation. And I think that kind of intersects with the teen anxiety that we are seeing. And I know from my time as an educator, when you talk to kids about what really stresses them out, some of the things that they talk about are things that are part of, there's a researcher that calls it schoolishness. So I think I would like people to use that muscle of the imagination to start saying or asking, what is maybe a better alternative to what we're doing? Because I know that change is scary and it is hard, but I actually think this is such a unique opportunity for us to realize we can have a more expansive vision of education, certainly a more human one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we're lucky, right? Because in education, there is an empathy piece, right? And that's what makes the difference for all of us, that we truly care about the people that we're surrounded by, and that we can make just a little bit of a difference in their life, right? And hopefully that makes them a better person and the next person better, and so on. I want to touch on something else that you mentioned, because it's actually made me feel really good about living on the complete opposite side of the world from my parents, right? Something that all of us expats struggle with. But you said that long distance friendships, relationships are usually much deeper than close distance ones. And I totally agree with that. But what kind of gave you that realization? Where did that come from?
So when I was looking into the research on long distance friendships, the researcher really wanted to flip. Of course, there's lots of risks, right? If you don't share the same geographical space, if you're not working in the same environment, if there's no odds of you bumping into that person in town, that's a threat. And the researcher wanted to look at what are actually some of the benefits and the pros, and why do people actually persist? And what they discovered is it's almost like we have this sense of urgency to make sure we really, if we want that friendship to survive, we go deep. So we won't just have surface level small talk, but when we go through something significant, we'll often share it with that person because we want them to know.
Yeah.
And I think about even that and the connection with what we can be doing in school. How do we maybe help people understand the art of meaningful conversation? How do we communicate in more profound ways that friendship is going to have, it's really going to matter in your life? And I don't know that we're doing a good enough job yet at helping young people really understand that and understand friendship maintenance. And it's interesting because there's a lot of adults who will say, as an adult, I don't know how to make new friends. I have my existing friendship network, but how do I do that? And I really think that's an interesting reflection of an education system that maybe has not valued that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. The person I was sitting and talking with, when you had us just turn and talk, we were discussing this exact thing. Like we all know that the system is broken, right? But fixing it's the hard part. So yeah, let's switch gears just a little bit. You've lived in Singapore. Tell me, like, what restaurant or what dish were you most excited about coming back and having again?
Chicken rice. And it's like such a simple dish, but it is so delicious. I don't understand the magic of how chicken rice is what it is. And I almost feel like it's Singaporean magic that I don't want to know the answer to. It's just comfort food. Yeah. It is delightful. It's delicious. It's affordable. And I find it's good everywhere. So wherever you are in Singapore, if you order it, I don't think it's like legal to have bad chicken rice here. It's probably against the law.
Love it. Love it. That's probably going to be what I go try to find tonight. Just to close, one last question. You shared your website with the free resources, triciafriedman.com, and thank you for that. I'm diving in for sure. What is it? What's something that you're working on that you're super excited about in the next few months?
Oh, continuing to do a lot of work with futures literacy, with school leaders who are interested in pursuing this idea of how can we use this to really decide the role that AI is going to play in leadership specifically. And so I've worked with a few different leaders in creating what's called a digital twin, which is basically like a chatbot version of them. And people have wanted to do this for different reasons. I worked with one school leader who said, I proposed this idea of everybody thinks heads of schools are scary. And if it's recruitment season and you have an interview, what if there was a version of you that somebody could practice with so they get to know your educational philosophy? Does that maybe even the playing field if somebody has met you before? That was interesting. I had another school leader that wanted to create one to try and better understand their own decision-making process. And whenever I start this process with somebody, I say this is going to be like the deepest level of reflection you have ever done, because we're used to, it's really just a two-dimensional, you're writing or you're recording yourself, versus this is interactive.
Yeah.
And so I am very excited about what are some of the new modes of reflection that we might be able to create with this technology, and then what does that mean? This is superficial, but I created a version of myself that is just the me on LinkedIn. And it was like so painful interacting with that version. And it got me thinking, like, that's not how you talk. You wouldn't want to talk to that person. Don't be that person on LinkedIn just because it's LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And that was a really great reminder to me of you do not have to conform to the space, like be yourself. But I don't think that I would have got there without that real head on. You try having a conversation with that person. You really want to do that?
Yeah. That's really interesting, actually, because my wife and I have this chat often, right? It's like, is that the best space for us to be spending time in? Sure, it's professional, but it's also very much a social platform. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Hey, thank you for the keynote. super, super fascinated to dive in and learn more about what you've got. But I hope that the rest of the conference is good for you and that you come back and see us again at FASE.
I would love to. I've just been so floored by the openness of the community and what a positive culture you've established here. It really is, I think, a model to a lot of other organizations that play is going to bond people. It's going to just do all of those things that we need for our human selves, that it's a reminder of, yes, like coming together, being social in a way where play is not a nice to have, but it's a core value. It feels different. So thank you so much for the invitation. I really am just humbled and very grateful that I had this opportunity.
Awesome.
Thank you.